Tampa, Florida has its own historic district. It's called Ybor City. Listen closely and you can hear that same urban heartbeat. But look a bit closer and you can see the scars, reminders that this historic area almost became history.
This was just one of the few areas that's left, especially in the historic part of the district, that remind us of what Ybor City was like, from the beginning, from the turn of the century. It really would have been the loss of a historic anchor for the community.
A brand new 454-unit apartment complex was supposed to be a crucial step in this district's new life. Still under construction, it covered 2 full city blocks. The wooden structure had recently been framed all at once. No sprinklers, no drywall to block fire, just wood. On the morning of May 19, 2000, a steady breeze was blowing from the southeast. A construction worker operating a forklift struck a power line, knocking it down. The wind-blown sparks ignited a pile of debris, then a palm tree, then the apartments themselves. Within 4 minutes of arriving on scene, firefighters knew that this battle wouldn't be fought to save a construction site, it would be fought to save an entire neighborhood.
Good morning, Fire Communications. May I help you?
The first 911 call came in at 8:56 a.m. The caller had seen the fire from her office window right across the street.
It's behind our building now. It's a new construction site.
That first call that we received on May 19th was unremarkable. The caller stated that there was some power lines that were down and a small pile of wood was on fire, but the building was not on fire.
If anything does catch on fire besides just that pile of wood, call us back immediately, okay? Yeah, it looks like it needs to get here quick.
So at that point, we did dispatch an appropriate response to it, 1 engine.
Station 4 was only 50 yards away from the fire. The response time on any other day would have been less than a minute. But on this particular morning, Engine 4 was in limited service while its radio was being repaired. Instead, since the fire did not seem to be serious, Engine 6 would respond from 1 mile away.
The fire seems to be getting bigger, and it's about 20 feet away from the apartment.
Okay, we do have that already. We are responding, sir.
It was unusual to get the amount of calls that we received on it. We had multiple calls. Every caller, though, stated the same thing.
Is the building itself on fire?
No, not yet.
Okay, we do have the car. We'll be there in just a matter of seconds.
Captain Steve Tonis and Engine 6 were on the scene within 5 minutes.
We didn't notice any involvement to any extent in the first apartment building. There was a palm tree that was burning. The forklift was in contact with the second wire. As we stretched that line, we noticed that the radiant heat got real intense, and I had my back to the building at that point in time. So as I turned and looked to see where all that heat was coming from, all of a sudden we noticed that the first and second floor, about 30 or 40 feet of the building, were fully involved. The fire had exploded upward into the 3rd floor and was extending almost immediately into the roof. It was like an explosion of fire.
Engine 6, give me a full alarm.
Engine 6 had been on the scene for less than a minute.
We have a power line that's energized. We have involvement of the structure. This is new construction. Probably spread pretty fast. Have the next company lay us a line, please.
You could hear the tone of his voice, just really go up, and you could tell that he was in trouble when he got there. There was going to be something big.
Pretty dramatic event. The heat was so intense that my firefighter, who had everything except his face piece on, he had a Nomex hood covering most of his face, he was burned and blistered his cheek through the Nomex hood.
Unable to make an attack with this gun due to energized power line.
And they couldn't do anything. It was like helplessness. The wire's blowing, it's burning. I'm calling Tico saying, get somebody over there.
We need you there like now. Yes, we're going to head there for the closest man is about 10 15 minutes.
The radiant heat grew so intense so quickly that the company was forced to relocate to the parking lot across the street. Little did they know that they would be the first of many engine companies that day to literally run for their lives. Only 3 minutes after arriving on scene, even before any other companies had arrived, Captain Tonis knew that the scope of this fire had exploded just as fast as the fire itself.
We have a second alarm. We have another building. The radiant heat is tremendous. We have exposures on
So we came down 21st Avenue, people running out of the post office, running out of the brewery, pretty much running for their lives. And we laid us 5-inch supply line to Engine 6. Their lights in their truck were melting at that point due to the intense radiant heat. So our first assignment was just to help them out and get some water, cool their truck down, and to keep the brewery from burning down.
We have involvement at the east on the #1 exposure, the Ybor City Land Company. We need to get a company up to the 3rd floor.
We noticed a lot of smoke coming out of the attic area, so we went up the outside of the building. We forced entry into the building, and we found a fire free burning in the attic area, so we were able to extinguish that within about 15 minutes.
The first alarm companies were already fighting the fire on 3 fronts: the apartments, the brewery, and the post office, which was not involved. The firefighting effort had only been underway for 8 minutes. The fire was spreading west, straight into the heart of the apartment complex. The crew of Aerial 1 was assigned to 19th Street. The intent was to use 19th Street as a new firefighting front to stop the fire.
Set up the aerial here and have engine 18, I understand. Yes, he's got engine 18.
By the time they set up and got pumped, it was too late. As the lights on the front of the truck melted and the windshield cracked, the crew scrambled to get out of harm's way. They barely made it. Their hose lines didn't. The Aerial 1 crew began to realize what every other company on the fire ground suspected. The battle for the apartments was being lost, but the real battle was just beginning.
We can make a stand, but I need a pump.
9:11 a.m., only 10 minutes into the firefighting effort, Captain Tonis calls for a 3rd alarm. 9:15 a.m., Interstate 4, just north of the post office, is closed. 9:17 a.m., over 12 apparatus are on the scene. It would be less than 1/5 of that day's total firefighting effort. The morning status meeting at headquarters was just beginning when the first alarm came in. The district and division chiefs could see the smoke from the conference room window. When the second alarm was sounded, the room emptied.
It would have been difficult had I not had those district chiefs from the very outset of the problem. I was able to talk to them directly and give them verbal, face-to-face directions as to which exposures to cover, and that they would be sector commanders at that point.
Captain Tonis had already transferred his command to Division Chief James Taylor at 19th and Palm. There would be a new command structure with 5 sectors, each led by a sector chief. The East Sector was the historic Ybor City Brewing Company, also known as the Ybor Gold Building. It was the #1 exposure. It had already caught fire once. The post office was given its own sector. As the fire later moved westward, it would appear that this exposure had dodged a bullet. The North Sector was a U-Haul storage facility, also an older building with heavy fire load inside. There would be numerous spot fires on this property, but the main concern was a 1,000-gallon propane tank on the leading edge of the exposure. The West Sector included a Catholic church. Behind the church was an elementary school. The church was relatively empty. The school was not. The South Sector was also a part of the city's heritage. The primary exposure was a 3-story warehouse, the Oliva Tobacco Company. If the tobacco warehouse burned, then the Ybor City Museum and historic casitas to the south would surely burn as well.
Well, it was really terrifying. Our buildings were built in 1895 and they're made of wood, and so they were just absolute tinder for it, and we knew that if that wind shifted at any moment that we would just be gone.
Forced to relocate for a 3rd time, Aerial 1, along with several other apparatus, made one more attempt to get in front of the fire at 18th and Palm. They wouldn't stay there long either.
We were at the church, and it was basically our last stand at the church, and the fire was progressing at such a rate, we again had to take down the ladder. And as we were trying to disconnect the hose, our jackets were smoking. It was absolutely that hot.
After moving away to a safe distance, the crew would abandon the aerial and assist other engines in protecting the exposures with hand lines. For the Aerial 1 crew, it was both their first safe position and their last stand.
This has already run its course on the north side from east to west. Okay, concern now seems to be on the southwest corner.
If they failed to stop the fire here, then the church and the tobacco warehouse would be lost, and the fire would easily wipe out entire blocks of history. It had to be stopped here.
And that's why this Ybor City example is such a good one. The response to that was enormous. And as you'll see in this next segment, Tampa Fire Rescue needed all the help they could get.
Oh, a 6-alarm fire. It means that we're going to deplete all our resources within the city.
Tampa's well was dry, and mutual aid companies were responding from over 25 miles away.
In 25 years, I've never really seen this much mutual aid, and it was just vitally essential that we have their help, and especially with Hillsborough County Fire Rescue responding directly to the scene, which was a great asset to us.
First alarm assignment was a chief and a ladder truck initially, and then as we saw the magnitude of the fire, we began calling it additional units because it was obvious you guys were going to need some additional help. A total of 29 units there altogether from Hillsborough County.
By the time the final under control was given at 4:07 p.m., the fire ground had seen over 60 pieces of equipment and over 150 exhausted firefighters.
It was probably 3 hours into it before we realized how exhausted we were. And from that point on, fatigue became a great factor. We go through air bottles a lot faster. The heat took a bigger toll on our bodies, and you had to take longer rest periods in between your assignments.
Engine 6 was actually on scene for the better part of 10 hours, and we were very well worn out after the day was over.
And the effort paid off. The fire was stopped at the southwest corner. All of the area's historic exposures would be saved.
We were assigned to rehab, and we were in rehab all of about 10 minutes when the call came out that we were needed over at the post office.
The Raptors are on fire. We need to put it out. Can you try to find somebody that can come open the door for us? It's locked. 10-4, bust the door down.
Throughout the morning, Engine 10 and Engine 4 had directed streams on the roof and the front of the post office to protect it from the radiant heat. It wasn't enough. The metal roof had sent the heat straight into the wooden trusses underneath. The fire had smoldered, undetected, for 2 hours.
I believe some county firefighters were already on the roof trying to gain access and to find out what exactly was going on there, but there was a lot of smoke coming out of the roof. I quickly found Chief Stokes, and he assigned us the interior sector to pull some sealant, see if we could find the seat of the fire. Just in a matter of about 2 to 3 minutes, no longer than that, from the time that we were behind the desk, it got incredibly hot and totally black. And we knew going in that we had a heavy fire above our heads.
Entire roof area of the post office, if they got guys inside, they better pull them out.
You know, we quickly talked and we said, hey, you know, we probably need to just back out of here and make sure we get everybody accounted for.
All units, be advised, we are in a defensive mode. I repeat, a defensive mode.
The post office would be a total loss. After the fire, 2 full city blocks would be burned to the ground. 4 other exposures would be damaged, but still standing. And Tampa citizens would have questions. Why did this happen? The opinions are varied, but almost everyone agrees this phase of wood construction is dangerous, and in a dense urban setting, it's a bad idea.
Yeah, if there's lessons to be learned here, it's the type of construction that's going on. This was a new type of construction for me, this what's called all-at-once construction.
You know, it was a vertical lumber yard is basically what we had there, and it was extremely hot and it was moving quite rapidly, so I'd never seen any conditions like that before.
The radiant heat from this incident was more intense than any petroleum product fire I've ever been to in 22 years.
And you know the saying, history repeats itself. Tampa proved that twice. You see, Ybor City also burned once before, 15 blocks of it, in 1908, exactly 6 weeks before the first conflagration in Chelsea, Massachusetts. So the question isn't if, it's when and where.
Wow, talk about a surprise twist in all of this. They have the exposures under control, they think, and then all of a sudden, smoke and flame rising out of the post office.
Well, they did a good job on all the exposures around the building, but again, the post office had a metal-clad roof, which is not going to show any fire. It's just going to continue to absorb heat, continue to absorb heat. The fire is going to get into the attic. It's going to bring the wood frame inside to temperature to burn. The other issues that they had to deal with was the double ceiling. They had security issues to deal with because of the U.S. Post Office, and they had a lot of vehicles around that had to be moved in the process. So it slowed their response a little bit to get into the fire area, plus they had to use their folks at a rehab, which also created some difficulties.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is complication, adding on complication here. Just at the moment when they finally said to themselves, we can start doing the rehab, we can kind of pull back just a little bit, we've got this under control, and wrong.
Yeah, well, all of us now are trying to rehab and take better condition of our firefighters on fire scenes, not wear them out completely. You try to put them in rehab for a reasonable amount of time. You let them work 15 to 20 minutes, you rest them 15, 20 minutes, and just keep using them, but not abusing them, so to speak. Let them rest. Let them put fluids back in, because it's difficult to keep working without a drink. So we try to do those things, but in this case, they didn't have quite enough resources on hand.
They don't have the luxury.
So they had to send those folks directly back to work after a 10-minute rest. Hopefully they got something to drink in that process to go back into a tougher situation, so to speak, because now they're interior firefighting as opposed to exterior firefighting.
And you just hope that your people are in good condition in the first place and that they've been doing the exercise routines that they should.
Well, we try to keep our folks in shape. We do periodic physicals on them. We ask them to try to stay in shape. We have tried to look at some diet issues. But, you know, you just hope you folks stay in good enough physical condition.